With the Miami Heat back to 3 games under 500, it's time for an open look at what happens next. Can the season be salvaged? Is it time to make a big trade? We take a deep dive on some numbers and have an open discussion on Miami's struggles on today's Locked On Heat.
You are Locked On Heat, your daily Miami Heat podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, welcome to Locked On Heat, your daily podcast on the Miami Heat. However you might be tuning in on YouTube, Odyssey, or on your favorite podcast app, thank you for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Today's episode is brought to you by PrizePicks. First-time users can receive a 100% instant deposit match up to $100 with the promo code LOCKEDON. That's PrizePicks.com, promo code Locked On. Well, the Heat are 11-14 after a 3-game win streak a week ago. They have now lost 3 of their last 4. The one win that they had was Friday night, 5 days ago, against the Boston Celtics in Boston, beating the best team in the NBA. And how did they follow it up? They do so with 2 really disappointing losses against the depleted Memphis Grizzlies team and then a really bad Detroit Pistons team. So we thought that we could take a moment here. What is this, 26 games into the season, and just take 25. A look. 25 games. 25. Thank you for the math. 25 games into the season, and just take a look at what's going on here. And we're going to do it through the lens of kind of a 3 different kind of segments. Whether or not that they should just hold on, stay patient. Hey, it's only 25 games into the season. No reason to panic. Guys are coming back healthy. Just hold the fort for now and try to make a run. We'll discuss that case, and then in the second segment we'll give you guys the case to make a trade, whether or not what certain trades could really make a difference for this team, and then obviously we'll have the case to tank. We're going to discuss the case for the Heat to tank, but let's zoom out.
May I address that before we get into it? Because we've had so many people say, oh, why are you bringing up tanking again? Conversely, there are a number of you who always ask, well, we should just blow it up. And that's why we talk about tanking, because we get asked about it on a near daily basis. This team should just blow things up. The team should tank, et cetera. So that's why we're always addressing the tanking issue.
Yeah.
How unrealistic or realistic it may be, we'll talk about that in the last segment. But that's why I just wanted to get that out there, because some people seem frustrated that we mentioned tanking. It's not like it's something that we want to do on a regular basis. It's something that a lot of fans want to listen to or talk to.
The team has the 8th worst record in the NBA. So yeah, right now they're in line for a top 10 pick.
Option,
right. So it is worth. Like, usually I do push back against the tanking conversation because I don't believe that the team would actively tank. But this team might be bad enough that it's just sort of tanking without trying to, which is almost worse. I don't know. But we will discuss that later on in the show. Let's start with the case to hold. Jimmy Butler missed 15 of his first 25 games here. He's back. He's healthy. I know he didn't play against the Detroit Pistons on the second night of a back-to-back. You've got Victor Oladipo making his season debut. Guys seem to get a little bit more healthy now. Bam is playing well. Caleb Martin has made an obvious leap, even if the Heat are asking too much of him. The case to hold and remain patient is that it's still relatively early in the season and that you are probably your healthiest you've been all season. And the schedule does get easier. Look, they've had one of the toughest schedules in the NBA so far. Like I said, it's led to the 8th worst record in the NBA. But this month of December, 3rd easiest schedule in the NBA, David. After that, they have the 10th easiest schedule in the NBA. They could be, if you look at the rest of this stretch, they've got games against the Thunder, the Rockets, 2 games against the Spurs. There's some easy games, winnable games coming up this month. They could, and I think realistically, be 19-18 or even 20-17 by the time of New Year's Day, by the time the turn of the calendar rolls around. So a game over 500, 2 games over 500, that's a realistic outcome for the Heat for the rest of December. So that would be the case, at least right now, to hold and not to panic.
I think, yeah, I mean, we're also viewing it as winnable in terms of what we think is possible, although we would have projected that maybe the Detroit game would have been a winnable one, albeit on the second night of a back-to-back set and missing your star player in Jimmy Butler. So I think you're absolutely right. I think, look, not only is holding probably the most realistic option, just because that's the mentality of this front office and wanting to say, look, we're committed to these players. We do see a championship window. For all the complaints from fans about running it back, this front office felt comfortable enough with this unit and having tried to make trying to acquire superstar players in Donovan Mitchell, Kevin Durant, but those things didn't pan out. And so they said, you know what, we're going to move forward with this group as currently constructed, for better or for worse. So I think there was some belief there that team could continue winning at a high level. And that's why holding seems like the most likely option. I do think you're right about the point regarding its health is certainly important to bring up because, look, you're getting Victor Oladipo back. And while we're not quite sure what he's going to continue to provide on a consistent basis, at least the question will be answered, right? You know, he's going to start improving. We saw some positives from him in his first performance yesterday. The expectation will be that he'll continue to get better. Maybe he'll miss more time. That seems likely as well. But, you know, you take those chances. Hopefully Gabe Vincent can come back, bring you another ball handler off the bench. Hopefully Nikola Jovic continues to improve. These things matter over the course of the season. You'll see slight incremental improvement from some of these players that you're counting on, for better or for worse. Again, maybe they shouldn't be part of the rotation, but the reality is that they are. This is the roster that you've got. You hope for the best and see if maybe they'll continue to improve over the course of the season. Now, having said that, you also have to, consider Max Strus, Duncan Robinson, guys who are struggling as well. Yeah. Will they continue to improve? That's a bigger question and one that seems less likely to get answered anytime soon just because they have more experience than some of these other players. I did want to mention something that I did some numbers on now that cooler heads are prevailing to some degree regarding the absence of Jimmy Butler, because I think it's worth noting that the team was without Jimmy against the Detroit Pistons. And so what should have been a winnable game was less winnable without Jimmy in the lineup. Okay, he's missed 10 games, as you pointed out, this season. They're 4-6 in those 10 games that he's missed this season. In 2021, the COVID-shortened season where they only played 72 games, the team went 7-13. So this isn't the first time we've seen without Jimmy Butler what happens. Last year, that was the aberration. This is why I think people expect these games to be imminently winnable, because they went 16-9 without Jimmy Butler. He missed 25 games, a lot. But they won a lot of games without Bam, without everybody else. And a big part of that, these players that stepped up last year, Strus, etc., they weren't even on scouting reports. Nobody knew how to prepare for them. Similarly to what we experienced with Miami going up against a Memphis team where we didn't know who the hell whatever. I can't even remember.
Santi Aldama. You didn't know who he was?
Sure, man. I did not know who he was. I still don't know who he is. And I don't think the Heat knew he was because they didn't expect the guy who was like 6'11" to shoot threes from the corner.
You've made the scouting report point. The scouting report point in the past, and it is a good one. The other part of it that I think tends to get left out is that a big part of that happened in December, where we got another wave of COVID hitting the NBA, and other opponents' rosters were depleted just as much, if not more, than the Miami Heat's were too. So it's such a weird number with so much noise in it that you're right. That's not the rule. That's the exception. It was a weird COVID-stricken season, and so you can't hold. And the other part, too, Miami's bench. And for whatever reason, it was a strength for them last year, maybe because of the scouting report point, maybe just because the team, those guys were playing better. Obviously, Tyler Herro being the sixth man and part of that bench was a factor in it. And it was a strength for them last year, one of the best benches in the NBA. This year, it's been a weakness, 24th best bench in the league. Another way to say it is the sixth worst bench in the league. They're getting outscored a lot, all the time. Part of it is that Tyler Herro is no longer a part of it. Part of it is that Victor Oladipo, Omer Yurtseven were supposed to be sort of the anchors of that bench lineup, and they haven't been available for most of the season until yesterday. You got Oladipo back. So that's part of it. But I'll tell you this, too. The starting lineup should be better. Yeah. This is the thing about the Miami Heat. They don't have a single player that does a single elite thing. And I hate to say it because you've got Jimmy and Bam, who are both top 20 players. Bam, top 20, Jimmy Butler, top 12, top 10, whatever we want to put him, whatever. We don't have to have that conversation. Both of them arguably top 20 guys in the NBA. Very valuable players, all NBA caliber players. Let's just put it that way. But here's just some numbers for you so far this season. No one on this team ranks higher than 40th in the NBA in points per game. 40th in the NBA. Do you understand where that is? Jimmy Butler leads the league in points per game. He's tied with Bojan Bogdanovic, all right, who's just sort of doing his thing, putting up points in Detroit. He's barely averaging more than 20 points per game. No one in the top 20 in assists per game. No one in the top 60 in blocks per game. Bam Adebayo leads the team in blocks. He's tied with Alex Caruso for blocks per game. They don't have a single starter in the top 30 and made three-pointers per game. The team is not good at rebounding. They're 23rd in rebound rate. They're average defensively. They're 12th. Even though they were trending up last week, they're 12th in defensive rating. They're garbage, one of the worst 5 teams in the league in offensive rating. They have a terrible net rating. Being average would be best case scenario for this team so far this season. They don't have a single player, David, doing a single elite thing. Bam, you could argue, well, no, Wes, you forgot. He's an elite switch defender. But given how much zone the Heat have been playing this year, that's sort of neutered Bam's greatest strength, where he switches against bigs and stuff like that. Like, the switch numbers are still there. But when was the last time you saw Bam just ruining an opposing ball handler's life, just kind of putting him in hell and just mucking up an entire offensive possession for the opponent? We don't see it as much as we saw last year because they just can't. They have to play zone because Bam is the only big man on the floor when he plays. And so you play zone to keep him closer to the basket so that your rebounding rate isn't worse than 23rd in the league because you're small all across the rest of the lineup. And because a bunch of the other defenders on the team are slow and not athletic and not good playing man-to-man defense, so you basically have to cover up for their weaknesses. So of all
this isn't a very good argument for holding, I got to say.
I just thought it was worth pointing out that this is sort of the problem with the Heat.
I think you should have saved this for the tank segment here, because if you're pointing out the fact that they're neither elite or that they don't have anybody that does anything at an elite level, perhaps the argument is more that, well, there's no point in holding. And look, I want to continue with the whole talk about Jimmy, because I think there's I compared it to some other stars that have missed time over the last 3 seasons as well. Giannis, the team is 3-1 this season without Giannis, whatever. That's fine. That's going to change over the course of the season once they play full 82 games. But they're 15-18 in total over the last 3 seasons without Giannis. Joel Embiid, when he's missed 43 games over the last 3 seasons, the team has gone 20-23 without him. Of course, they were also missing James Harden for stretches like that. Luka Doncic, another MVP type player, right? The team is 10-14 without him. Over the last 3 seasons, again, including that 16-9 mark last year, the Miami Heat are 27-28 without Jimmy Butler. So it's possible, as we're talking about this team and a bad loss yesterday. Yes, I know he sunk it up on Sunday when he was actually out on the floor, but they were missing Jimmy Butler. And if they continue to have Jimmy Butler in the lineup, and if they get Jimmy Butler, the version of Jimmy Butler that we expect will be there in the playoffs, I think it's a pretty strong case for holding pattern. Like,
Jimmy Butler, look, you're right. The team's net rating with Jimmy Butler on the court versus off the court is extreme. Like, when Jimmy Butler is playing, this has been a good basketball team all season long. The other reason so I agree with you. Look, getting your star player back and healthy is huge. I also realize that Jimmy Butler hasn't played 60 games in a season since he got to Miami. How many more games is he going to miss? Is this knee issue? It's the same knee that bothered him in the conference finals. Is this really behind him? Is this something that he's going to have to deal with? How many more games can he miss? How many more games can he afford to miss? The Heat have to go, 34-23 just to get to 45 wins, which is probably what it's going to take to avoid the play-in tournament in the East. The other case for holding, though, and they could probably do it if Jimmy Butler can stay healthy. The other case for holding is that aside from the Boston Celtics, Milwaukee Bucks, and the Cleveland Cavaliers, no team in the East has really taken hold on a playoff spot. There's 2 games that separate right now the 4th place team in the East and the 10th place team in the East. 2 games. So the Heat are just, if they can take advantage of a strong December, right? A weak December schedule, if they could take advantage of that, get healthy and stay healthy and go on a run here, that alone could be enough to propel them right back into the playoff picture. And if you're there, okay, now you're in the playoffs, you're back in the mix. So that's the case for holding. Let's also discuss the next layer of this. With a week before the unofficial start of trade season on the way, should the Heat make some fringe trades, or is there a bigger move that could be had here? First, we're going to talk about LinkedIn jobs. Today's episode of Locked On Heat is brought to you by LinkedIn Talent Solutions. These days, every new potential hire can feel like a high-stakes wager for your small business. You want to be 100% certain that you have access to the best qualified candidates available. That's why you have to check out LinkedIn Jobs. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the right people for your team faster and for free, like hiring a great producer for your podcast or the assistant who makes your day-to-day that much easier, there's nothing like making that perfect hire to help your business. That's why you need to check out LinkedIn Jobs, which makes it incredibly simple to create a free job post. Plus, you can add your job post in the purple hashtag hiring frame to your LinkedIn profile to spread the words to your friend that you're hiring. Simple tools like screening questions make it easy to focus on candidates with just the right skills and experience so you can quickly prioritize who you would like to interview and hire. It's why small businesses rate LinkedIn Jobs #1 in delivering quality hires versus leading competitors. So if you still need to hit your annual goals, get some help around the holidays, or close out that final round of KPIs, LinkedIn Jobs can help you end the year right. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates that you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free at linkedinjobs.com/LockedOnNBA. That's linkedin.com/LockedOnNBA to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen. For your next listen, check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day, available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, wherever you get your podcasts. All right, let's discuss some of the trade stuff here, because if we believe that the Heat can hold, and I, in terms of like patience or panic, my sense about the Heat is that they lean more towards patience. Hey, look, we just got Victor Oladipo back. Maybe we'll get Omer Yurtseven back one day. Jimmy Butler is back and healthy. Like, there are things that you need to monitor and measure between now and basically the trade deadline and the end of the season before you start going into any sort of panic scenario. But we will get into the tanking stuff a little bit later.
Before we get into specific tanking, I'm sorry, specific trade scenarios or anything like that, just from a macro view, what's the biggest area of need for the Miami Heat, in your opinion?
It's size and talent. It's size, or not even talent, athleticism. It's size and athleticism. I think if you can get some size and athleticism on the floor, then you could start doing some other things. You could play more man-to-man. You could switch a little bit more. You can move Caleb Martin around and not ask him to be a power forward so much, and you can get a little bit more versatile. You can match up with bigger alignments depending on the matchup. There's just other things that you could do, and it's that, and it's just kind of getting somebody to make some threes, because the other stat that I have is I think the Heat need to figure out, all right, is Duncan Robinson just that unplayable? Because he's even now, I know he played a little bit against the Pistons, but he's basically even lost the token minutes that he was getting. He's basically out of the rotation for Haywood Highsmith at this point. Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, their three-point shooting has just turned into a pumpkin. Like, these guys are not shooting well right now. The Heat had, nine players last year shoot better than 36% from three-point range. Guess how many they have this year, David?
2.
They have 1, Caleb Martin. That's it. Oh. Nobody else is shooting even 36% this year from three-point range. That is really, really bad. The question for the Heat is there a regression back up to the mean? Do we believe that Tyler Herro, Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, these guys can get back to where they were last year? Or was last year an anomaly for these undrafted guys, and we're asking too much of Tyler Herro in the starting lineup to bail us out, and maybe he's not going to be able to hit that efficiency with the volume that he's got to have to do? And all that, and do we need to go find maybe more of a specialist in terms of three-point shooting? Because the Heat need to find three-point shooting too, because the other part of this, in terms of need, is they have no identity on offense. What have we come to expect from the Miami Heat over the last few years? The entire offense was just dribble handoffs and side-to-side movement and getting those open shots, and they were so dangerous. The dribble handoff game was such a strength of theirs. Last year, again, they were at one of the top teams in the league in points per possession, scoring off of handoffs. This year, 5th worst in the league, points per possession. They're scoring 14 points fewer per 100 possessions off of dribble handoffs than they did last year. That is a crazy swing, and it's all because they're just not making shots from beyond the arc. Those are the shots that get open, and they're just missing them. They're still doing it at the same frequency. They're still attempting them at the same rate. They're just missing all of them. So if you're the Heat, you got to ask yourself, do we think that this three-point shooting is going to come back to average, and it's going to float up for us, or do we need to go make a move to address the three-point shooting issue, because it's such a big part of our offensive identity? We need space around Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo. And then the other part, too, is, like I said, the athleticism and the size that they obviously need. Would you agree that those are the needs?
Yes. No, I've heard various people talking about, they need another ball handler or they need a wing defender. I think they've got those things already, or at least those pieces already in place there. They
need everything, but I don't know that those are the top needs.
But I think, they're I would say, and I was asked this in a recent episode of the Miami Heat UK podcast, what they need. It's size and rebounding, and we'll get some size back once the return of Omer Yurtseven takes place, but that doesn't necessarily address the athleticism. It doesn't necessarily fix things either. Like I think we were hoping, as many of us did, with the return of Victor Oladipo, that he would provide all those things that you could kind of slate for him. Like he's going to be a good defender, point of attack defender,
TBD.
he's going to attack and things of that sort. But you never know what you're going to get from him. I think at this point moving forward.
Right. No, it's a good case, but that would be the one way to at least address. All right, do you need an on-ball defender? You need another wing on-ball defender. You need another ball handler. All right, let's see what Oladipo can give you. Hold on to this. Wait, you can't even trade him until the middle of January anyway. So what's the point? Just get a sample size here and figure it out.
Category too. I did not know that it was reported that he can't be traded until January 15th. So
Deadman, because they both have the 20% increase on their salary because of the bird rights, and
And then Oladipo, in a recent piece by Anthony Chang, he also said he has I guess something in a clause in his contract that he has to approve of any trades.
That's true.
So that is something I did not know either.
That's true. I do wonder if that's something that, remember it was a 1-year deal and then they turned it into a 2-year deal. With a player option. I do wonder if there's sort of a wink, like, hey, we're going to give you a little bit extra money and we're going to give you this player option. But if we find an opportunity to trade you, we don't expect you to throw a fit if it's anywhere that you don't want to go, and we expect you to waive that no trade clause. I'm not reporting that. I'm speculating. But
no, it's possible.
Anyway, so in terms of actual trades, what can the Heat actually do? And you look at their assets. They have 2 of their own first-round picks. They could create a third first-round pick to swing a deal if they lift protections on the OKC pick that's lottery protected in 2025, which, by the way, is going to cost something. So what that would be, we don't know. But it would cost some other asset for OKC to play ball. They have 2 distant second-round picks that they can move. It's like 2028, 2029, that's it. Max Strus, Gabe Vincent, even Haywood Highsmith, I think the varying degrees those guys could help, like playoff rotations, can help benches. But all 3 of those guys are making less than $2 million. And so you're talking about like sweetener and a larger salary kind of package. And so you can't really be like, let's swap Max Strus for Jay Crowder. Like, it doesn't work that way. You got to throw extra salary in there. And now the other team has to be down to take on that extra salary. And the Heat don't really have great extra salary. You got Victor Oladipo making close to $9 million this year. Nobody knows what to make of him. Tell me the team that wants to take that injury problem on. And then Duncan Robinson is making $19 million this year. And he's one of the most untradeable contracts in the league. And it just doesn't sound like there are any takers for any of these players. Now, a lot of things can change. Next week, players who were signed this last offseason can become trade eligible. There are other bad contracts around the league. But if you're a Heat fan expecting them to move Duncan Robinson for some sort of starting caliber power forward, I got news for you. It's probably not going to happen. If you're able to somehow trade Duncan Robinson, which again I'm dubious about this season before the trade deadline, you're probably just getting another really bad player, or I shouldn't say bad player. You're getting a really tough contract, albatross type contract back, and you're really just kind of shuffling deck chairs at this point. But that would be in terms of assets, in terms of making a trade. That's kind of what we're looking at.
Yeah, it's not a particularly optimistic view here. I mean, of the 3 options, a trade, I'm not sure if it seems less likely than tanking, but it doesn't even seem very realistic. There's just not a lot of good contracts. And for those who have said, trade Jimmy Butler.
Well, that's tanking. That's tanking.
That's tanking.
That is tanking.
That's one thing. And another thing, but in just context of just overall trade discussion, unless he demands a trade, and he hasn't, that's not going to happen either. You build your franchise to have a superstar level player, and Jimmy fits the bill. For better, for worse, whatever warts he has, whatever problems he might bring, whatever availability issues he might have over the course of a regular season, he is still a superstar level player. As you just said, top 12-ish, top player. That's good enough to have the superstar label attached to it. And yes, he might struggle during the regular season because, well, that's just the nature of his game. But we've seen what he's capable of in the postseason, and that's the belief that the Miami front office has in him. And so he's not getting traded. Kyle Lowry's not getting traded either. Nobody wants to take on that contract at this age. That's just
he's been good. He's been good for the Heat.
That's another conversation, but you're absolutely right. Like
what are you going to trade? Even if you did trade Kyle Lowry, what are you getting back? Like what Minnesota would do cartwheels if the Heat called and said D'Angelo Russell for Kyle Lowry. The Timberwolves would be doing cartwheels. Thank you for saving us, is what they would tell Pat Riley. The Heat are not doing that. You don't want anything to do with D'Angelo Russell. That's not a good trade for Miami. That's a worse player. brings a whole other set of issues. Who was also on an expiring contract. So,
So as far as the moving deck chairs, then
I have one
again,
idea. I have one idea for you.
That's fine.
Did you have
Let's
an
get
idea?
into it. I know. I mean, I've heard the conversation of Davis Bertans, right? Another guy that needs a change of scenery in an exchange for Duncan Robinson.
That's the other guy
Our
for the
best
Mavericks.
3-point shooter for their best 3-point shooter.
Yeah, I mean, it's the other name I threw out there a couple weeks ago was Tim Hardaway Jr. because he was playing so poorly, but he's 5 straight games with 5 made threes or something. Like he's actually helped that starting lineup for Dallas. So that's not on the table anymore if it ever was. Even Davis Bertans is 1 year less on his contract than Duncan Robinson has left. So I don't know that the Mavericks would do that. I really don't. Like everybody's just kind of saying that that's just there for Miami if they want it. I don't know that that's true. I don't. And so the one deal that I'm looking at as a maybe option, and I've got no reporting on this, but I'm just thinking like the Lakers aren't getting anything from Patrick Beverley or Kendrick Nunn. They're not getting anything from Juan Toscano-Anderson. Like, would you do Duncan Robinson for Patrick Beverley and Juan Toscano-Anderson? I don't know that the Heat would even do that. I'm not sure the Lakers would do that, but that's the kind of like bleh, vomit in your mouth kind of move that might be the only option. It might be the only option for the Heat come trade deadline.
I can't say. I mean, I don't even.
You don't even know. Nobody would do that. You don't. I'm not asking you to tell me if you do it or not. I'm just telling you that's the kind of, for Heat fans with their expectations. When you're starting to play with the trade machine, Heat fans listening to this, that's the kind of move. Don't start doing Duncan Robinson for John Collins, Duncan Robinson for Miles Turner. It's not happening. Even Miles Turner has played so well that I don't even think that the Heat would get him for Duncan Robinson in a first-round pick. It might take 2 firsts to get Miles Turner out from Indiana, especially since they're holding on to hope that they're probably going to get the Lakers pick.
I would do that trade.
Which one? The Patrick Beverley one?
Yeah.
All right. Cool.
I think it addresses some issues, and none. I can't believe I'm saying this, but you have another player who can, in theory, attack the rim and do some things, and there's a comfort level there. I guess there's a belief that maybe they could bring him back to the player he was when he left in free agency, although he was struggling towards the end of his tenure here in Miami. So I think there'd be issues. Toscano-Anderson, again.
I don't think it would be all 3 of them. I don't think you're getting all 3 of those guys. But I think I would take Juan Toscano-Anderson on this team. He's a willing ball mover, team player, good guy in the locker room, can at least fill the power. He didn't play, but he could play power forward. That's something nice. So I don't know. I don't know. Patrick Beverley and Juan Toscano.
Worse than Caleb Martin?
He's not as good of a player as Caleb Martin, but you could play him at power forward at least as a backup, and then or even as a starter, and then move Caleb back to the bench to his natural position because Juan Toscano-Anderson is kind of naturally more of a 4 than Caleb is. But whatever, like that's not. The Heat aren't going to win more games if they make that trade, I don't think. So it's almost like, nah. The value to Miami is that Toscano-Anderson and Patrick Beverley are both expiring contracts. That would be the value of it. And then for the Lakers, you're like you have no elite 3-point shooting outside of Austin Reeves apparently. So you get Duncan Robinson, who I believe he is still an elite 3-point shooter. I just think he needs a change of scenery. You don't go from shooting 44%
and those kind of players thrive alongside a LeBron James.
Exactly. So that would be the kind of trade that we're looking at. Who knows? I don't see Miami parting with any first-round picks for a minor move, or even like a high-level rotation player like a Miles Turner or John Collins, because as we know, they're holding on to these first-round picks, the few that they have, to try to swing a bigger deal. And I do think that a trade is probably a big trade, more likely in the offseason than it is before the trade deadline. Would you agree on that?
Yes.
All right. The case to tank, I got to tell you, David, I'm a little bit more open to it now than I was a week ago.
5 days ago.
That's coming up next here on Locked On Heat. Thanks for making Locked On Heat your first listen. Follow us on Twitter, on Instagram, email lockedonheat@gmail.com. All right, the case to tank. Let me give it to you, David. So right now, the Miami Heat have the 8th worst record in the NBA. All of the things that I said before about the fact that they don't have a single elite player that does anything at an elite level. That stuff is true, and I don't know that I necessarily see any of that changing right now, at least before the trade deadline. The other part of tanking is that when you and I discussed this last, we discussed it within the framework of, well, if you tank, you got to trade Jimmy. You got to trade Lowry. You might even have to trade Bam. I'll repeat that the Heat have the 8th worst record in the NBA. They might be bad enough to just go ahead and tank. Maybe what tanking could look like for this team. Now, I don't think they're going to get in on Wemby. That's probably not going to happen. They're not going to get in on Scoot. That's probably not going to happen. But you start talking to people who are really monitoring this draft class, and they'll tell you, hey, Wemby is a once-in-a-generation prospect. Scoot would probably be the number 1 pick in most any other draft that didn't have Wemby in it. But don't sleep on the rest of this draft. This is a deep draft. This is a loaded draft class. A top 10 pick in this draft class could get you something real. And when I go back to saying, what do the Heat need? They need athleticism and talent and size. There are a lot of guys that fit that bill in the top 10 area. The Thompson twins, local kids even. Like those guys are gettable in the top 10. So if this holds, and let's just say you play twins? The Thompson twins. What did I say?
Who are the Thompson twins? I don't know.
Oh, no, Amir and Astaire Thompson. I forget what high school they went to. Somebody will correct us in the comments. But they're like 6'9"-ish, kind of rangy wings, the kind of players that everybody's looking for nowadays. And a bunch of other players that people like. If you just play Jimmy, I don't know, 50 games down the stretch, give Kyle Lowry days off, reduce minutes of your starters, kind of just coast this season and end up where you are now. Right now, if the lottery was held today, the Heat would have a 6% chance at landing the number 1 pick, a 26.3% chance at getting a top 4 pick in this draft. Those are decent odds. They would have the 10th pick, I think, right now, 10th or 11th pick right now. They're on pace for that. If they just sort of do what it is that they've been doing, that to me is the case for tanking. Maybe you sell some spare parts before the deadline, get some assets back and things like that. But if you're looking for a quick infusion of youth and talent, this might be the way to go, is all I'm saying.
The counter to that would be Eric Spoelstra probably wouldn't play those guys anyway next year, right? And so maybe you're developing them for a year or two down the road, which is absolutely fine, but that also just doesn't coincide with what the team likes to do. That's just not how they operate. I think they'd rather be a 30-52 team than a 20-62 team. Yeah, even if that means getting an injection of talent. I mean, you look at Bam, a mid-first round pick, Tyler Herro, another mid-first round pick, Nikola Jovic, et cetera. Like they believe that they can continue to add superstar level players, that they'll make the right move here and there, and in order to build the version of the contending team that they see fit. And then I don't know that they see any 19, 20-year-old in the draft and be like, that's the missing piece. The Jovic plan is something that's a more long-term one. And that's why he doesn't get the kind of playing time that maybe some of us think he should, because he's just not ready right now, but he will be ready in a year or two to play alongside Bam and maybe an aging Jimmy Butler and help carry them into a more ignitable offense than what we're currently seeing. So I understand. I could
the other layer of
I could pretend and make a case for tanking. Knowing this team and this front office the way we do, that's not going to happen unless, as I've made this point before, somebody sustains a season-ending injury, and that's Bam Adebayo specifically. Because you can afford, well, maybe not. You can't afford, but you know that you're going to miss games from Jimmy Butler. You know that Kyle's going to miss games, but Bam has been your centerpiece, your mainstay. He's been steady. Yes, he had injury last year, et cetera. But if he undergoes a season-ending injury, as crucial as he is to what they do on a day-to-day basis, then this team has no chance, even with Jimmy Butler. Even if Jimmy plays every game for the rest of the season, I don't think it's necessarily enough. You cannot risk the loss of Bam Adebayo. You just don't have the depth. You don't have the overall talent. And so if Bam had an injury, then yes, they'll embrace the tanking thing. But I just don't see it realistic happening. So I know.
If Bam gets hurt and then you play Jimmy, 40 games over the rest of the season and he misses the rest of them, then yeah, that would be considered tanking. The other layer of it too is if you kind of do go in the tank here, then are you doing that to try to make the most out of Jimmy Butler's window? Or is the second layer of that trading Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry over the offseason? And what a polarizing Jimmy Butler and an aging Kyle Lowry would get on the trade block to me is an interesting question. But that would be the other part of it. And I get the sense from this organization that they are much closer to being buyers and trying to prop open that window than they are being sellers and trying to kind of push the window out into the future. That's what I think. That's sort of my sense from this team. But and that would be again a trade. If they're gonna prop open that window, it would take it would take a trade to get another superstar player. Who that player is, I don't know. That trade is also much more likely in the offseason than it is the regular season because of all the things we said. Also because Tyler Herro, his contract, the poison pill provision makes it really difficult to trade him right now. Although, if anybody would get that deal done, if anybody could figure out a way to trade a player on a poison pill contract, because it's not illegal, you could still do it. It's just super hard. Right. Andy Ellsberg would be the GM to figure that out, okay? And there's two teams, San Antonio and Indiana, that have a ton of cap room that could be a third team to facilitate something like that. Just pointing that out. I don't see that happening right now between that and the trade because it also requires a superstar shaking loose, and I don't really see a superstar right now demanding to get traded between now and February. So in the offseason, Heroes.
Let's make it simple for our listeners, viewers. What's the percentage of them tanking versus them acquiring somebody via trade versus what they do versus them holding still and just maintaining the course as it is?
I would probably say 10% chance that they tank on purpose. It's probably less than that. It's 5% chance that they tank on purpose. 15% chance that they're just this bad. I don't think that this team is this bad, and they're gonna, if they just do what they do and get guys healthy, that they'll just be this bad for the rest of the year. They could miss the playoffs. This could be a play-in team, right? They could end up in the lottery, but I don't think they'll be top 10 draft pick bad. What am I? I did math to myself, so now I'm like, what am I? 20%. I think there's a 40% chance that they do a trade. It's not going to be a major trade, but something just to do something. I think that there's a chance that they just do something. And then it could just be as simple as like what they did with KZ Okpala last year, something similar, like very minor, but that counts as a trade. And then whatever's left is just staying with what they got.
Yeah, I'd say it's probably a 60% chance of just holding. Because then again, I think they see this team having a healthy Jimmy, a better Bam, Kyle and Tyler as complementary role players that can have big games here and there. And then seeing that we're 5 days removed, you and I, not even 5 days. We had this conversation on Monday. Do the Heat have a big four? And it didn't seem far-fetched considering their performance against the Boston Celtics. And now we're questioning everything here. But I think that's how the team still sees the upper ceiling for this group as being, you know what, we still have four very, very good players. One star, one superstar in Jimmy, and then two other, good all-star level type players in Tyler and Kyle.
Yeah.
And then having said that, they can expect that the bench guys, the role players, will fit their roles. They'll be able to do what they can to complement that big four. So with that in mind, I think that there's still a belief that this team can continue to win and win at a high level. And you do what you can to get into the playoffs. Once you get there, you trust in your experience, you trust in your coaching and your leadership, you trust in Jimmy Butler to take it up a notch, and you hope for the very best. So I would say it's probably closer to 60% that the team holds, 35% chance of a minor trade happening. I don't see a major trade certainly happening, as you said, not until the offseason, and then a 5% chance of them just being bad and maybe not, being a top 10 pick and worthy.
And the reason for them and the reason for them holding also is all the things you mentioned. I do still think that there is a stubborn belief that this team still has. They don't have the same energy level, the same level of urgency that they had at the start of last season. That much has been proven. But that's not to say that they can't lather themselves up into something, a plucky playoff team or something. And maybe they do. The other reason that they hold is there's not much optionality outside of what this roster is, as we've already discussed. So it might, for better or worse, they might not want to be holding. They might want to be able to go out and get a real power forward and this kind of stuff, but they just might not be able to do it. It's one thing to just say, hey, go make a trade. All right, what's the trade? It doesn't really seem to be out there right now. Things can change between now and the trade deadline. We'll see. So yeah, look,
57 games left in the season. What's their record over that 57-game stretch?
I don't know. They have 57 to go. Like I said, they got to go 34-23 to win 45 games, and that's what I think it's going to take to avoid the play-in tournament. Can they go 34-23 with the 10th easiest schedule remaining? It's possible. Healthy That's what they're betting on. We'll see, man. We'll see. We have it's an interesting December coming up. A soft cupcake-like schedule. They can take advantage to get some of these wins here. They have to take advantage. I'll tell you this, man. If we're having this kind of conversation at the beginning of January, it's going to sound a little bit different than what it sounds like right now. So, all right, that'll do it for us today. Thanks again for making Locked On Heat your first listen every day. Remember to subscribe to new episodes of Locked On Heat on your favorite podcast app and on YouTube. Ring the bell to get notified as soon as new episodes go up for your next listen. Check out the Locked On Sports Today podcast, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. It's available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, and wherever you get your podcasts. Thanks for joining me, David.
You got it, Wes.